Hello. What if I were to tell you some facts about the grain deal and then tell you some facts about the French intelligence services? What if I were to tell you about various companies that have invested not only in the grain deal but other things as well? What if I were to tell you that the French are training people with their own controls to protect these interests? So let's begin, shall we, with the grain deal first of all. Now, all we hear in the Russia-Ukraine conflict is that the Russians are starving the people of the poor countries by not allowing the grain ships to pass, which have been proven to be smuggling weapons under different flags. The Russians have not hit any of these ships. They've waited until they've unloaded, and then they've hit the ports, and they've hit them very, very hard. Now, some of those have been grain. Some of those have not been. This all started because Russia were in agreement with Ukraine and the UN that if Ukraine's grain was allowed to travel and go to its destination, then so was Russia's. What if I were to tell you that Russia were actually going to give for free, with free delivery, grain and wheat to Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea? 40,000 tons to be precise. Last year, Ukraine harvested 55 million tons of grain. Russia harvested 156 million tons of grain. So let's get into this. Ukraine export 5% of the grain supply. Russia export 20%. So if you're not allowing Russia's grain to reach the poor countries that it's supposed to reach, and indeed you're taking it or stealing it for the EU, is that not theft? Is that not depriving poor countries of their grain and therefore food out of their mouths? Surely this can't be right. Surely the narrative is that the Ukraine grain is the one that's feeding the whole of the world. No, it's quite simply not true, and we're being lied to by the mainstream media. Now, we will get into this in a little more detail, in that the EU were intercepting Russia's grain and selling it at a cheap cost. This was then passed on to various companies. Two of them are French, and they have been selling the grain at an enormous profit, saying that it is in very, very short supply because the Ukraine grain cannot get through. Well, that's complete nonsense. So let's have a look here. Polish farmers and Hungarian farmers blockaded various areas to stop wheat getting and grain getting through. Last year, the Polish and this year as well actually managed to block all the roads, the Polish farmers. Now, it is of a less quality grain and it has flooded the market. And the whole idea of flooding the market is it drove the prices down. This is the problem. Polish and Hungarian and other farmers couldn't make a living because the price was so low. However, the grain they were receiving and moving on to other EU states, they were charging exorbitant sums for. So it's a scam. And only 3% of that reached Africa. 3% of the total grain that came from Ukraine. Now, what we're talking here is numbers, and we're talking millions and billions of pounds over time. And it is without doubt that the French have two companies, which for legal reasons I cannot name until I have the documentation, but it is well known, and I have sources that tell me that this is absolutely so. Now, what we also have is the French intelligence services training various people in Niger and in other countries to protect the platforms for the minerals and for other interests that they have there. I can name one of these companies, Arriver. There is also Total Platforms as well, but they're trained as security to make sure that nothing happens. This is all under the guidance of the French. We now have the French taking everybody out of Niger because they are getting ready to airstrike, which is a wonderful, wonderful euphemism for carpet bombing civilians. And this has happened before, as we know. The French were very, very active in bombing Syria, especially the French Air Force, and we know what happened there. Now, what we also have, which is very, very troubling, is it not, is Arriver, the company that are also mixed up, are mixed up in the uranium, and this is why Niger is under the attack that it's going to be from the French. And make no doubt in your mind whatsoever that this is coming, and it's coming hard. The French are being slowly driven out of Africa and happening in various countries now. And the problem we have here is there is so much money awash. Now, just in case you weren't aware, Arriver have contracts in Niger, and what they have is 30% of French households use the uranium, or is derived from the uranium that comes from Niger. Now, what they were doing was getting these contracts, keeping them completely secret. You cannot even see these contracts and the amount of money that's changing hands. However, we can tell you exactly what is going on here. So what was happening is they're driving the prices of French fuel through the roof. However, the uranium they are receiving, and let's not forget 70% of their energy is nuclear. And Arriver is a nuclear company, and you can see they've got probably the tallest building on France's version of Wall Street. Now, what was happening was these, for instance, we're going to use percentages here because I know sometimes numbers are slightly troubling. So we'll use percentages, and what they were doing was they were paying 10% of the value. Now, the Russians and the Chinese were willing to do a deal with Niger that would see them get 50% of the value. We all know how consumerism works. Everybody's got to get paid, so you buy at a slightly cheap rate. Now, the companies like Arriver were paying 10%, but charging you in France, the customers, 70% for your fuel. So they were making absolute profits by the bucketload. Okay, this is all wrapped up as well with French intelligence. There are French intelligence officers at the moment in Nigeria, and I am going to tell you a little bit about what is going on there. There is a document from and it is out there for everybody to see. There is a document out there from the French military and the French intelligence services asking Nigeria to mobilize. That's exactly right. French intelligence, French forces are asking Nigeria to mobilize their army. We know what's coming. They have also mobilized their air force. This is all for profit. It's got nothing to do with the people. The coup, led by this gentleman, has obviously upset the French enormously. Niger are a very poor country. Most of the households don't have electricity, and sometimes don't even have basic amenities that they need to live. Meanwhile, these companies in France are making money hand over fist, and they're passing it on. They're not doing it to benefit you. They're doing it to make a huge profit. So the real reason that France are going to bomb Niger, with the full backing probably of NATO and the full backing probably of the UN, with this illegal coup. If you think it's an illegal coup and this should be put down, why on earth was not the illegal coup arranged by Victoria Nuland in Ukraine in 2014, when they turfed out Yukhanovich and put their own puppet in charge, who then started all this conflict in Ukraine? Why was that not stopped by the UN and by the EU? It seems to me as though France can do whatever they like and have done so in Africa for many, many years. And unless they're stopped, they'll continue to do so.